Alan or Dustyn, do you have a link to the event? Like not the meetup, I mean the link to the actual online event.
I think Alan's got it.
Okay. Because I just realized normally I register for those things so that I'm on the list, but I forgot. So I just registered now, and of course I don't see the link.
Hi, yes, the link. Oh, oops.
Oh, echo.
That's better. The link is acker.ms/MSDUG United. MSDUG United.
/MSDUG United. Yeah, got it. Perfect.
Sure. I'm getting security and privacy settings asking to record my screen. Lovely. This is lovely. I can't share the screen because it's stopping me with some security setting.
Do you want me to show some slides from my screen, and then after that I'll keep it shared for my presentation?
Yeah, I can quickly switch. Yeah, or one second. One second.
Okay, there you go. I've shared the slides for you.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for attending our second lockdown online event. We've seemed to have lost Dustyn, so we can kick off. With the intro to the event. But thank you everyone for attending. These events, we look forward to putting these together every month. So hopefully you'll enjoy the second event in lockdown, and hope everyone's surviving lockdown. Okay, so we've put together a whole team. It's called our United Live team. It consists of all our community leads, and of course our wonderful speakers that we have tonight. We're really blessed tonight with some really high caliber speakers. So we have a team that will be on camera. They'll be there for moderation as well. So we've got Laurent all the way from Europe. Yeah, thank you very much for attending. Luckily, we're in a very similar time zone, so you're not put out too much on time. Thank you very much for coming. And we've got Homo on the line, Antonio, we've got Matthew, we've got Karika, Dustyn, and of course me. Well, if you don't know who I am, my name's Alan. We've got Pavendran on the line and also Gordon. It's quite an expert panel, so if you've got any questions, we should be able to field those quite nicely. Okay, so what we normally do with these events, we have an intro, and what we like to do is socialize all the events that's happening in the community, because we did find that attendees don't know what events are happening around the world or around the country or even the city. So we've put together the intro just to give an intro into what's happening in the community and what's going on. So kicking off with what's happening in June, we have what's known as a Remote Resilience Online Hackathon. That's not just a South African event, it's a Middle East and African event. It's sponsored by Microsoft. It's quite a huge hackathon. It involves preparing oneself for being online, and in this lockdown environment and things, this is quite an important hack to see all the solutions that happens or that you could put together for remote working. So we then move on to July. July is our next event that's happening, is our MSDUG United events, which is exactly 1 month from now. We will be kicking that off with an introduction to Maui. So Maui is a cross-platform UI environment. It's a spin-off of Xamarin Forms. We are very privileged to have David Ortino from the actual who's the principal program manager of Xamarin Forms and mobile dev tools at Microsoft. He will be speaking to us directly. So it's very nice to have the team giving us the truth straight from the factory that's building it. We're also going to have Ronald. Ronald is an Azure MVP. He'll be speaking to us about building serverless applications and creating distributed APIs on Azure. We also have Pavendran. Pavendran's at the moment on this call as well, and he will be speaking to us about GitHub Pages. He's a Microsoft MVP. He's also a Facebook friend. I'm not sure if I'm using the right term. He's an equivalent of a Facebook MVP. And he is a tech streamer. So Pavendran, even though you deny it, you are known as a tech streamer. Right. So in August, we're going to have exactly our monthly event. An event will kick off with Donna Sakar, with an interesting name to her talk, which is Why Do You Hate Flowers? It's all about using the Power Platform and AI and to determine types of fabric to use for your clothing line. So that should be quite interesting as well. She's a principal advocate at Microsoft on the Power Platform. We're also then going to have Gagani Young. She'll be speaking to us about JavaScript, running that in the cloud. She's a Microsoft MVP, and hopefully she can also maybe share with us some more awesomeness around her IoT lightsaber as well, which is a really awesome talk she's got and a project she's got there as well. Then Stephen will be speaking about building beautiful Xamarin Forms app. He creates really pretty looking Xamarin apps. So that's a awesome talk not to be missed. He's also a Microsoft MVP. Okay, but the reason why we're here tonight is not to listen to me. It is to have our three awesome speakers deliver some brilliant content. So we're going to be kicking off with Laurent. Laurent's, as I said, is connecting from Europe. He is a software engineer, and he works for Microsoft. He is going to be giving us an awesome talk on debugging Azure applications in production. So really looking forward to seeing that. Then Karika. Karika is going to be giving us a mixed reality talk and demo using mixed reality with Power Apps. So it should be really cool. And then Homo, hopefully Homo joins the call. I haven't seen him here yet, but and he's not having issues with his tenant. But he will be giving us a talk on Blazor and using that with custom vision. Homo is also a student partner, and very impressively, he's a UN Peace Ambassador as well. So we are in greatness this evening with our lineup. So what we're using is Microsoft Teams live events. If you want to drop us a question, you can on the right side of the screen, you'll see a live event Q&A. You can drop questions in there. This live stream as well, if you want to share it with people that haven't got access to the meetup site, you can share it as acker.ms/MSDUG United. We will answer the questions live, but we've also planned for after this event just a little mixer event, like a networking streaming or actual Teams meeting where we can all network together. And there, if you don't have all your questions answered, you can then ask those in the actual Teams meeting. So you can switch on your mic, you can switch on your camera, and you can interact, not just in the QA window. It's not just for questions. You can network. You can also do some socializing and things. You can bring your milkshakes or beer or whatever, and we can maybe just have some fun and chat about tech. All right, and I'd like to thank our sponsors. We're part of the Azure Tech communities. We're also part of the .NET Foundation as well. So each of these three groups that's united as part of the .NET Foundation. And if you would like to speak, everyone has something to say. So we've got 2 sessionized links as well that you can submit talks. But yeah, that's enough from me. Over to Laurent and the experts for the evening.
All right. So I am going to do the share your screen dance, which is always fun. And here we go. I see a red border, which indicates that my screen should be shared. So hello, everyone. And yeah, thank you so much, organizers, for having me. I had such a blast. When was it? March when I spoke in Johannesburg? I forget now. But it was great, and I had a lot of fun there. And so when Alan said, "Hey, can you do something online with us?" I was immediately on board, and I welcoming you here in my living room in Zurich, Switzerland. We are actually on the same time zone, so it's kind of funny that it's very bright and shiny here, but it's because we are further north, of course. But yeah, it's 6 p.m. as well. 6:15, and I want to talk to you about debugging and interacting with production applications. So for those of you who have attended Microsoft Ignite the tour, you may recognize, the slide deck and all that, because it's actually a talk from Ignite tour. And hopefully it is useful for you. If you have seen it already, feel free to go and get some dinner or something. I'm not angry. If you haven't seen it, or if you want to see it again and consolidate the knowledge, then please stay on the line. And I'll definitely stay on the line also for the two additional talks. And I'll try to join the networking event as well to talk with you all. So here we have a few resources. So these resources for the talk for Ignite Tour in general, and you may know that Ignite Tour unfortunately was cancelled because of the event, of course, but we had the chance to do it in Johannesburg, so that was great. So if you have seen that already, you know that you have all the resources online. You can go, especially on the second line. This is the repository where you can find all the slides, or links to the latest slides, I should say, links to video recordings as well, and also all the source code that I'm going to show you. What it means is that you can install the Tailwind Traders application, the web application that we are going to use later in the demo. You can install it to your own subscription, and then you can try the demos by yourself. So hopefully this is useful for you. We have actually spent quite a lot of time making those demos easy to install and easy to reproduce. You have step-by-step description on how you can reproduce everything. So the key of the matter is that working with production application is difficult, and we probably all know that as developers. You develop on your own machine, and then everything works, and then you put it in production on a different server, different machine, different configuration, maybe a different time zone, etc., etc., and then suddenly you start getting bugs. And of course, we have all said at some point it works on my machine, and unfortunately, it's not that easy to debug when it's not on your machine anymore. And there are multiple reasons for that. First of all, it can be difficult to get information about what's going on. All right, maybe you have instrumented your application with logs, but maybe you have turned logging off in order to have more performance, or any other reason, or maybe you have just not instrumented your production application with logs. Getting data about what's happening can be difficult. Also, the mere fact that the configuration is going to be different can cause issues. I had issues in the past where when I was running on my own machine, which was very fast, for example, it was running fine. And then when I was running that on the production machine, which was maybe a little bit slower or whatever, then it was causing issue. And the reverse can be true as well. If you have a machine, like a dev machine, which is slow, and then you deploy to a production server, which is fast, then sometimes you also have some weird things happening, some multi-threading issues and these kind of things. So that can be a big problem. The sheer scale of what's happening, like for example, if you start scaling up and then you have multiple instances of your application running side by side, that can cause issue. Configuration is different. And of course, the data can be different as well, because you're working with a production database as opposed to a development database. And just getting the tools can be complicated. There are a lot of tools that you may want to have, and you don't necessarily know where to find them. So there are multiple sources for errors. The infrastructure on which your application is running can cause issues. It can be maybe a virtual machine somewhere, or if you are using Azure platform as a service, a web server on which you're running, and of course underlying there is always a virtual machine, even though you don't always have access to it. The application, the code that you wrote, can cause errors, obviously, right? We are all human, and we all make mistakes. And of course, networking, right? If you have an error in an application, the first thing is to probably blame the network. That can cause a lot of issues. This is pretty complex. So you need to know more about the whole infrastructure on which your application is running. So in this session, we are going to see multiple parts in which Azure can help you to do that when you deploy to Azure. First of all, we'll talk about Azure Monitor, which is really the solution logging everything about your application and about the infrastructure on which it is running. And then we'll take a deeper dive into application insights, which, like the name shows, is more about your application, about your code. And that's something that you can instrument. We'll talk about log analytics, because it's a fact that we collect so much information, so much data, that it can be really hard to analyze this data and to make sense of this data. And so this is where log analytics can help you. Then we'll talk about snapshot debugging. I don't know if you have worked with snapshot debugging, but it's pretty amazing what you can do in a .NET application. Very simply, you can just add a NuGet package, and immediately you start collecting a lot more information about crashes, especially. And we'll see a demo. You can even go back in time and replay the production exception, the production crash on your deployment, on your development machine, and understand what happened. So it's like a DeLorean for debugging, if you want, like going back in time. And then finally, we'll talk about deployment slots, and I'll show you how you can use those to deploy something safely and easily. And then after that, you can swap, and so you can avoid errors. And if you have an error in the new deployment, you can always roll back to the old deployment. So without further ado, let's talk about Monitor, Azure Monitor. So if you have anything in Azure, your resource is going to start participating in Azure Monitor. It's just always there and always starting to collecting information as soon as you create a resource. Actually, even before that, as soon as you log in, we start collecting information. And so we collect metrics and we collect logs. And this is all unified, meaning that everything goes into a single pot of information. And then after that, you can use some tools, for example, log insights, log analytics, like I mentioned before, application insights, etc., to make sense of those logs. You also have the possibility to use analytics tools, for example, to integrate everything into Power BI, or you can do some machine learning, enhanced queries against your data to learn about, for example, about anomalies into your data. If you have, I don't know, a certain number of exceptions per month, and then suddenly you have way more exceptions, for example, that can be interesting to consider and to be warned when this happens. Also, integration into other scenarios, for example, continuous integration, continuous deployment, other tools that you have where you may want, for example, to automatically log some tickets when something is happening, these kind of things. Good. So in Azure, we talk about signals and sources. The signals are what we are collecting. So we are collecting metrics, logs, as well as alerts, and we collect those from different sources. And if we start at the bottom, you see that we have the Azure tenant. So it is basically when you log into your account, into a certain tenant, then this is going to be registered and this is going to be logged. And then after that, on top of that, you have your subscription. Every account can have one or more subscriptions. And again, at the subscription level, this is also going to log things that, for example, where the resource manager is running. I don't know if you heard about ARM, ARM, that's the Azure Resource Manager. It's a very, very important part of the life cycle of your resources. Also, just things about the service health. If Azure is down, that can happen sometimes if the data center where your application is running is down, etc. Security information. On top of that, you have the resources that you created. So those can be, for example, virtual machine. If you create a virtual machine using IaaS, infrastructure as a service, but even if you use PaaS, platform as a service, for example, a web server, application service, or even serverless functions, there is always a virtual machine on which it is running. So we are going to collect information about that. Things like storage accounts, for example, which are a fundamental part of your applications in Azure, networking, network security groups, etc. Then on top of that, you're going to have the operating system. So you know that on Azure, we run things on Windows and on Linux. So we are going to observe that as well. And then you have your own application where you can instrument code, for example, with different logs, application logs, things like that, as well as telemetry, things like I don't know, how long does a user spend on a given page before he navigates away? So that can be interesting to know. For example, if you add a new feature and you want to make sure that the users actually saw the feature. All right, so this is all unified, like I mentioned. It all goes into a common pot. And this part, after that, you have some tools and some utilities that you can use. For example, Application Insight, we'll talk more about that. We also have the container monitor if you use containers. I'm not going to demo that here today, but we have other resources where you can find more information about that. Monitoring of VMs, also very important. You can visualize that using dashboard. We'll show a quick example a little bit later, but also integrate, for example, in Power BI, or even do a continuous export to a database that you can then connect to a third-party tool. For example, we have things like log analytics that I already mentioned to kind of make sense of what you are collecting. And you can also get some alerts, which can be very interesting because sometimes it is important. And I know that we keep saying, okay, you need to take days off and you need to rest during the weekend. It's true. But if your website goes down on a Saturday evening, you probably want to know that on the Saturday evening and not on the Monday morning when you go back to work, depending on, of course, on what you do with the website. Also integration, for example, via event hubs, via Logic App, you could very easily really implement something where you say, all right, if something happens, then send me an email, send me an SMS, for example, or log a ticket into a ticketing system, into a support system, these kind of things. All kinds of APIs that you can use with third-party tools. So how do you wire everything together? Well, for everything which is on the lower side, which is really like the fabric of Azure, if you want, this is going to be done pretty much automatically. You have logs and metrics. They all flow into the common pod. For the operating system, it depends a little bit. If you are using your own virtual machine, then you're going to have to install some extensions and agents yourself. It's part of the increased responsibilities that you have when you use virtual machines directly, infrastructure as a service. On the other hand, if you use things like application service, serverless, I don't know, Azure SQL DB, etc., those run on virtual machine, but the virtual machines are managed by Microsoft, and in those cases we have instrumented those, and that's going to flow automatically. And finally, you have the application itself. Like I mentioned, Application Insight, it's an SDK that you install. We have support for JavaScript, for Java, for .NET, and more. All right. And you also have the possibility to have custom sources. I should have mentioned that as well. So you can also observe other things, like, for example, have virtual machines or whatever resources on your own premises, and then that can also flow into Azure Monitor if you want. So let's see a demo. And for this demo, what I'm going to do is go here in the portal, and as you can see, I have a number of things running here. For example, here an application service. So this is a web server, and this web server is also working together with a SQL database and Cosmos DB. So we have the Cosmos DB here, which is using Mongo APIs. This is for our shopping cart. And here we have the product description for the website in a SQL DB. And so this is a website that we are running. It's Tailwind Traders, all right? It's one of the biggest fake companies in the world. It's pretty amazing what they are doing here. They decided to go to the cloud, and we are helping them here. And so you can go and navigate a little bit. Here we have this beautiful microwave. I'm very interested in that microwave, so I can log into my Tailwind Traders account. As you can see, I have a very distinctive email address, and then I can add this to the cart, and now the product has been added to the cart. So it's kind of the application that we are going to monitor. And around that, we have a number of things happening, and a lot of those things happen just automatically. For example, if I scroll down here on the dashboard of the application service of the web server, we see that we have some graphs. And for example, I have here the HTTP 500 errors, so all the server errors. I have data in, data out, request, average response time. We see that here we had a very, very slow response at some point, so maybe I want to investigate. And if I want to monitor that, I can easily put things on my dashboard. So for example, I'm going to put data in. Now we see the interaction that I just had appearing. I'm putting data out, and I'm also going to put the errors here on the dashboard. So if I go back to the dashboard, I can see those graphs. You see that they are correlated, so it's quite easy to read them. And for those of you not familiar with dashboards, you can easily edit those as well. So for example, I can go into the edit mode here, and I can place any resource I have, any resource I want on the dashboard here, I can modify that. I can also resize, for example, the graph here. I can move this here and resize it as well. And basically, I can build my own dashboard quite easily, which allows me to very easily have a good idea of what's going on in my application at the moment. So this is part of the things that you get automatically and without having to do anything. It's just part of Azure Monitor. A few other things that you get, for example, inside here, the app service, we have things like streaming logs, and streaming logs are really interesting. So if you want to check the logs here, you see that you can very easily switch on application logging, for example, for information level, or you can decide to have error level, etc. I also log here web server information directly to a file system. And then after that, I can have access to that, for example, using FTP. And here I'm hiding some information just for security, but I'm just going to show that to you here. You see that I have access to this FTP here. Of course, you don't see the username and password, but that's somewhere else safely stored into the portal. So I can do that, but sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome because maybe you want to see immediately what's happening on your website. And this is where Logstream can be very interesting. So here, Logstream is going to start a new console, and immediately you see that something is happening, right? So every log that we have with the information level is going to be shown here. And so that allows me, if I pause now, and to go back in time and to understand a little bit better what's happening. So here you have different logs which are shown, and you can also instrument your own thing. So every time that you get an iLogger into your application and start logging with information levels, that's going to be shown here. So that allows you to instrument your code so that you can follow up what is happening directly on the production server. So it's quite useful. All right, so I believe that I showed you everything I wanted to show you here. So let's talk about Application Insight. And Application Insight, if you go here into the app service and you go down, you see the tile for Application Insight. So let's talk about that. And then after that, I'll show you a demo. So if I go back to the slides here and talk about Application Insight, before we do that, let me show you the doc alerts that we have, if I can see it, voila. Doc alert, so it means that we have collected for you some collections of links to our documentation. And so if you go to this ak.ms here, you will find the documentation about Azure Monitor, an overview, as well as a lot of quick starts and everything. So let's talk about Application Insight. Insight is going to allow you to go a little bit deeper into your application. So we have Azure Monitor, which monitors everything, the infrastructure and everything, but you can also go down into your app and get the big picture, understand what's going on so that you can fix problem and also optimize, because that's when your application is running well, it's a great time to observe it and to learn like what is taking long. Is it taking long to call my Cosmos DB database or my SQL database, or to run this kind of process? I don't know. And maybe that's where you want to optimize so that you can give a better experience to your users. So that's also very interesting. So Application Insight has all kinds of graphs, even more graphs than I showed you before in Azure Monitor. We'll take a look in a moment. And it also has a lot of information because it's going to collect on the server. So if you have a web server, if you have a web API, for example, you can collect things. If you have functions, you can collect things, but also on the application. For example, if you run a WPF application, a web application with JavaScript, or a mobile application with Xamarin, or even with Android, etc., or iOS, you have some SDKs that you can add, and you can also collect information from your users directly, which can be interesting if you want to know a little bit more about what your users are doing, how long are they spending on each page, where do they navigate first, etc., so that you can optimize your application. Good, so a lot of things, a lot of sources of telemetry. And the cool thing is that this telemetry is going to be also traced with unique IDs, so that if your application is navigating through multiple servers, or maybe there is also a database involved and maybe multiple databases, etc., you can really trace the request from the client all the way down to the server and back, so that you can follow up what's going on and really follow your application step by step if you want. Here we have the APM, the application performance monitoring. This is a great place. I'll show you a demo where you can learn more about what is taking a lot of time into my application. Analytics, we'll talk more about the log analytics in a moment. DevOps tools, so we have integration, for example, here on the illustration with Visual Studio, but also integration with, for example, Azure DevOps or these kind of things. And you have also the application map, which is one of my favorite features. I'll show you a demo, which is showing you all the components of your application, as well as tons of information about what is happening between those components. And like I mentioned, everything is correlated. So if your application is running on multiple servers with load balancers, or maybe multiple components, you can really follow step by step what's going on. So let's take a look. So like I mentioned, there are multiple ways to go into Application Insight. For example, here I have a tile where I can go, and this instance of Application Insight here is collecting information, or can collect information from multiple web servers, multiple web applications. So I could totally have, for example, an Azure function instance running together with a web server and together with some mobile application, and all this information flows into the same Application Insight instance. And then if I click into that, you will see some information about what is collected. So this is first a kind of a landing page if you want. You see that it's enabled. And down there, I have multiple ways to instrument my application. So if you use .NET Core, like what we have now, the Tailwind Traders is actually an ASP.NET Core, which is running on the server. And then on the client, we have React.js application. So here we have .NET Core, and immediately we are going to start collecting things like, for example, profiler information for performance, snapshot debugger. I'll show you a demo a little bit later. SQL commands are also logged. And if you have things like Node.js or Java or Python, etc., then you have to add the SDK manually, and then you have to instrument a little bit more manually, but we have some information about that in the doc. So let's go into Application Insight directly. So now I'm really diving into Application Insight per se. And I see a few things. I see an instrumentation key, which is going to tell the SDK where I'm going to log things. If you are logging things, for example, from a mobile client, etc. And like I mentioned before, we have a few things like the application map. Application map is going to show me really a map of my application. It's a little bit small, so let's zoom in. And here I see that I have a few green bubbles. Here I have a staging web server, I have a production web server, and I also have another one which I call Canary, and we'll talk more about that when we do the deployment slots part. And then in addition, I have my SQL database, as well as my Cosmos, no, this is the client, sorry. Here I have the Cosmos DB with Mongo, the Mongo API. So as you can see here, the request took 57 milliseconds in average, so it's quite good. And the MongoDB here replies, the Cosmos DB replies in 8.7 milliseconds, so it's very fast, as well as, in fact, the SQL database here, it also reacts very fast with 9 milliseconds. And as you can see, I have here something which is red, which is interesting. It may mean that something is wrong here. We'll check a little bit later. But basically, that already tells me that there is not really a performance issue here on my application. I can totally go back here into the root of Application Insight, and I can check the performance. For example, if I want to verify that there is indeed, that I have indeed a good performance in my application. And here you see, for example, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. You can see, for example, the distribution of durations. And so it tells me that here, this is 50% of my application is below 2.5 milliseconds. So it's really very fast. I have here quite a lot of things happening between around 7 or 8 milliseconds is still acceptable. And I have a few outliers, even one at 3.6 seconds, but it can be a very special case. For example, the application was restarting or something like that. If I had here a spike at a few seconds, for example, for maybe more than 50% of the calls, or even 10% of the calls, then I would start to investigate, because it means that something is wrong. So using that, you can very easily see if you have some problems. You can also see what requests are taking longer, etc., etc. So really a lot of information here. And let's go back to application insight in the root. A few other things that you can check, for example, live metrics. This is an interesting view, because if you have a large monitor and then you want to hang it on the wall on your project room, for example, then you can see in real time what's happening in your application. And that can be quite nice to observe. For example, you can see the call durations, and here the health of your application. For example, CPU, we see that we don't have a problem. Right now, my whole application is running on one server, but if I was scaling up because I need more power and I have a lot of requests and I have configured automated scale up, for example, then I will see all the servers appearing here. So you can really keep an eye on your application. Also, exception rate is at 0 right now. It means that my application is pretty healthy. So that can be quite interesting to observe for your project team during production time and see what's going on. So quite a lot of nice application. So let's go back to the slides, and then after that, I'll show you some parts of application insight a little bit more in detail. So let's talk about log analytics. Log analytics is a part of insight. And like I mentioned, what can be really hard is that we collect a lot of information, and also we collect a lot of sensitive information, I would say. And so log analytics is going to allow you to check it out, and it's going to allow you to make sense of these tons of data, for example, creating tables or creating graphs, extracting information. And also, it's going to protect your sensitive data, because it allows you to have role-based access control. So not everybody can have access to every part of the data which is collected. And that can be important, for example, if you work with contractors, or if you work with people who don't necessarily have the whole overview of your application. It can be interesting to secure your data a little bit, because we collect a lot of sensitive data. And as you will see a little bit later when I show you the snapshot debugger, we can even show you the decompiled code and everything. So that can be quite tricky. All right, so using analytics, you can dig deeper, and I'm going to show you a quick demo. So here I am back into my app service. I'm going to go into application insights again. And then I'm going to open the log analytics. And so to find log analytics, I can simply type here log, and it's called logs here in the tree. And then after that, it's going to show me here it's going to show me a UI, and you're going to have the possibility to have some example queries because it's a query language. And so again, it's something new that you need to learn. And so, the best way to learn is with examples. You also have documentation that you can go and check. So if I click here, it opens a new docs.microsoft.com page, and then you can you can have an overview of the language, of the query language, see how it works, as well as have a complete reference of everything of the language. So I'm going to close that. And then here I can go back to my UI. And one thing which is nice is that you can also start just typing, and then you're going to have some IntelliSense. For example, I can type here, and then I say, okay, I want the exceptions. And I'm going to summarize those exceptions. And you see, I just type here, just like I would in an ID, and I will say total count equals the count by app ID, for example. So I'm going to group things by app ID. Here I only have one application, so it doesn't quite make sense. But like I told you, you could totally have multiple web applications that you are monitoring here. And then if I run this, you will see that we'll have some data. Okay, so right now we have 23 exceptions. It's shown here as a table, which is good. I could totally show that as a graph, while here it doesn't quite make sense because I only have one app ID, so I have only one column. It's a little bit stupid. But I can do that. And then after that, I can say, all right, I want to change the time range. For example, show me the same information for the last hour, and let's run it. And here I don't have any results, so let's go back to maybe 4 hours. Let's see, okay, now I'm back to those 23. It's because I caused a lot of exceptions when I was preparing for this talk so that I had something to show you. Another really cool thing with log analytics is that you can actually share those queries. So if you go here to copy link, and you copy the link to the query, and then you send that to one of your coworker who may be in a totally different country, and you say, hey, check it out. And this coworker also has access to that information via the role-based access control. He can just paste that into his web browser, and then he can see exactly the same query with the same result. And so that makes things very easy to share with your colleagues. For example, if you want to together debug an information, and so here you see I have the same query, I have the same time range, I have the same results as well. So that's also quite nice because you can show that to your colleagues and work together. Let's see a few example queries so to make them a little bit more interesting. So response time trend, for example. So here we see that we have a query where it makes sense to have a graph. Maybe you don't like line, maybe you prefer unstacked column, for example. And here maybe we want to zoom in a little bit so we can say, all right, the time range here is set in the query. So I can say, let's say 1 hour ago, for example. Or if I want, I can just say, no, I want to remove the time here from the query. And then I'm going to set the time here using the UI, for example, for the last hour. So you see, it's very, very nice and easy to use. And again, if you want to create very complicated queries, you can do that as well. There is a lot of documentation around that. Or of course, you can check existing queries and learn from that. So log analytics is a really cool tool. And again, right, you can log tons of things, even your own custom events. For example, user entered method so-and-so, and then user exits method so-and-so if you want to check which methods take a long time and this kind of thing. So that can be quite interesting. Here you have, again, documentation about the log analytics. So if you go to this ak.ms, this is where you can find everything. So let's talk about snapshot debugging now. Snapshot debugging is a very powerful tool that you can use in your .NET applications. And in order to add that, it's actually quite easy to add it. You're going to just add a NuGet package. It's an SDK, and then immediately it's going to start recording information about your crashes. And that will allow you to debug in production. And we all know that it's really the hardest thing to do is debug things which are running in production, because you don't want, it's a little bit like Schrodinger's cat, right? Your server is running well until you observe it, okay? So you want to avoid observing your production server as much as possible, but you also want to have a maximum of information from your production server. So using snapshot debugging, it's going to collect a lot of information during the production, and then you can get this information from the Azure portal. And if you have a crash, you can even replay the crash. So you can go back in time, for example, an hour ago or a day ago or whatever, and then step by step run what happened, a few instructions before the exceptions until you get to the exception, and then you see what's going on. So it's really super powerful. It also supports and it facilitates debugging distributed application support because everything is correlated. And so if you have a load balancer, you're going to be able to make sense of what's going on a lot easier. It's also secure by roles, also role-based access control, which is absolutely necessary because we share so much information, we collect so much information there, even code, like you will see in the demo, that you don't want just anybody to be able to see that. So when you debug locally, it's easy. You have one machine, very often one development machine, which often is used as server and also client, and so it's very easy. But of course, if you go on Azure, you have multiple servers, you have a load balancer, you also have multiple clients, and it can be difficult to make sense of what's going on. So you need to check out, okay, which servers are running, which servers are faulty, and then which clients are actually connected to that server and which client has the error. And then after that, you need to bring everything together. And this is exactly where a snapshot debugger can help you to make things a lot easier to debug while in production. All right, so here for the demo, I'm going to go back into Application Insights, and I'm going to close this, voila. And if I go in the overview, so there are multiple places where you can get started. For example, you can go on the application map and check out those red lines, which indicate that there is probably an issue here. Or you can just go into the failures. Into the failures, this is where you will see all the exceptions that happened. And as you see here, I have a lot of exceptions around that time. And the reason why I have so many exceptions is because, like I said, I caused exceptions voluntarily. So I changed something in the code which started crashing my application, just so I have something to show you. And so let's drill down a little bit into that. So I'm going to investigate those MongoDB exceptions here. And I also have some issues with SQL, but right now I just want to check those Mongo here. And as you can see here, I have a few things, quite a lot of information. In fact, let me close that to see a little bit better. First of all, I see here a little bit better what happened in a timely manner. But here I also see the requests that were put. And I see that here I have a problem at this location. So I'm going to check out the end-to-end transaction detail. And if I open this, you see that you start really at the client, that's the web client here. And we go here all the way down to see some posts. And then we have some posts for the login. And then we have the landing page for the product. So we see all the APIs. And then we see some APIs which are starting here, some API calls which are starting to react badly, including here an exception. And as you can see from the small icon which is here, this exception has a snapshot debug, or a debug snapshot, I should say, associated to it. So let's click on that. And here we have a lot of information, including the call stack. So again, this is an ASP.NET Core application. So we have here a call stack. And I can also open the debug snapshot. So let's do that. It takes a few seconds to open it. And the first time you do that, by the way, you're going to have to enable to give some access to the snapshot debugger here. But the information is collected anyway. So just the first time that you do it, you're going to have to click one more time. And so the first thing that we can see here is that you can actually download the snapshot. So if I download this snapshot here, it's going to offer me a file here, and this file is called diag session, as you can see. So if I download this and then I can open it with Visual Studio Enterprise, this is where you can start really going back in time into your exception and then playing step by step. So really your debugging on your development machine, but you're debugging the situation as it happened on the production server. So that's really, really powerful. I'm going to give it a few more seconds to open because I'd like to show you the content. But basically what you're going to see is a lot of information about the exceptions that just happened that caused this snapshot to be collected, including a decompilation of the intermediate language code, which is going to really allow you to locate very fast and very easily where did this exception happen and to understand what happened so that you can actually fix it. It's taking a little bit longer than I was expecting to analyze the snapshot. So maybe what we'll do is that we'll continue with the slides and then we'll come back to this screen before we dive into the last demo. Because apparently it's taking just a little bit longer to analyze everything. Again, like I said, those snapshots are pretty intense in terms of content, and there is really a lot of information into that. So let's go back to the slides for now. And what I want to show you now is deployment slot. So deployment slot is one of the very first features that I used when I was using Azure, when I deployed my very first website to Azure, because it gives you such a great feeling of security. And really, deployment slots are about making it easier to deploy a new feature to your website with a lot of security, because you're going to keep the old version of your website in the cloud. You're going to swap basically say, okay, my staging server becomes my production server. But if you have an error that you didn't anticipate because you have tested, but maybe you have missed something, or maybe you have just messed up, it happens to the best of us, then you can always swap back and very fast, very easily come back to the previous situation. So deployment slots are a feature of app services. So you get them into app service, which means that they are also available for Azure Functions, because Azure Functions run on an infrastructure of app service, even though you don't see the web server. But It is also there, serverless applications. So you have those slots. And here, as you can see in the portal, I can go and add a slot. And then here, for example, I have 3 slots. I have the production slot where 80% of my traffic is going. I have another slot which is called staging. That's what I'm going to use to deploy new features. And I also have a canary slot. This is used for A/B testing. I'm going to show you a demo in just a moment. But basically, it is a place where I can say, all right, I'm going to randomly send 20% here on the screen, 20% of my users to the canary slot. And then I'm going to observe in application insight, for example, if they stay long on the home page where I have a new feature, then I know that they like the new feature. Or if they leave my application immediately with a disgusted sound, we don't actually record or log the disgusted sound, but when you read the logs, you can kind of see it. You know, if they say just like a microsecond of on your homepage, then they don't like it. So then you can learn a lot from user behavior like that. All right, so how do you do things? Well, first of all, deployment slots are going to allow you to have a staging version online so that you can show it around to people and validate the change before you actually go to production. When you're ready, you can swap. So staging becomes production, production becomes staging. What is happening is that we have a load balancer, which is redirecting the traffic from one side to the other side. That takes just, under a minute, I would say, to happen. So it's quite fast. Then it also happens without any downtime. So you can totally deploy and configure the new version of your website. Let's say that you have a new database, all right? Because this is very often what we hear. Oh, I have also a new database. Well, it's fine because the staging slot has also their own configuration settings. What it means is that you can say, all right, I'm going to configure my staging slot. I'm pointing it to the new database with a new schema or whatever. And you're testing that everything's running. And then after that, you do the swap, and the swap happens without any downtime. So I told you the swap takes about a minute, but during that minute, your old server is still there. And then suddenly, puff, the new one is there. Okay, so there is no downtime to deploy your new application. But even better, and that's probably my favorite feature here, you can roll back. So if you have introduced a regression bug by mistake, you can always roll back and go back to the old version, which is still there, which is still available. Also, you can use it for canary testing, A/B testing, like I'll show you in a moment. So let's see deployment slots. Very first thing, let's go back one step into the debug snapshot, because as you see now it has loaded. And so we had an exception here. We see that we have the call stack, we have a lot of information, we have all the locals, the variables and everything. I can go into here and see exactly what happened. And I even have, like I said, the decompiled code, which is showing me exactly where this exception happened. In that case, what actually happened is that I messed up on purpose the connection string, and so basically the Mongo client couldn't find the connection, couldn't start the connection with the connection with the online database because I messed up on purpose. So this is what happened here. So that's all good. Let's go back to our website here, app service, and then as you can see down there, I have my deployment slot. So let's go and take a look. So here I created 3 deployment slots. I have one which is production, one which is staging, and one which is canary. So if I take a look at my application, you see that this is a production application, all right? This is my website. Imagine that it sells tailwindtraders.com, but basically that's my production. And I'm not very good at spelling. As you can see, I put some typos. I have appliances and sync. I should know that this is not how you type appliance and sync. So this is bad. I already fixed that in a branch of my GitHub repository. So here, when I configured this staging deployment slot, I also pointed it using the deployment center. This is one of the many ways that we have to do continuous integration, continuous deployment. But using deployment center, I can say, all right, you're going to go to this GitHub repository and you're going to observe this branch so that when I push something to this branch, it's going to show up here automatically. Another possibility would be to use Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions. We have like a lot of different possibilities to do continuous integration, continuous deployment. But here, this is how I configured things. So here in this branch typo, this is where I actually fixed the issue. And in fact, if I go here to the overview, notice that I'm in the staging slot, all right? So it looks exactly the same as my production slot, but I am in the staging slot, so I can have its own configuration, its own settings if I want. I can, for example, point it to a different database if I want to configure a new version of the database. And I also have my own URL. So if I click here, you will see that it says -staging. And in fact, here you see that, oops, I have some additional errors. We'll come back to that in a moment, but at least here appliances and sync are fixed. So let's imagine that I didn't see the error, all right? I'm saying, okay, I'm a very good programmer. I'm absolutely ready to swap. So I'm going to simply swap staging and production. So I click on the swap button. I'm going to swap staging and production, and let's do it. It's going to take a few seconds where basically the load balancer is going to redirect. It's under a minute. While it is going on, let me show you how you actually create a slot and deploy. So here I have my slot. This is another instance of the same portal. You can add a slot and you can enter a name, for example, testing, and then you can say, all right, I want to clone the settings, for example, from the production. So what it's going to do is that it's going to do a copy of the settings. And then once you have done that, you can actually go into the settings. For example, if I go to the Canary one, and then you can have, this is a copy of the production settings, but then you can go and modify it and basically change the settings for that particular slot, so that when you swap, those settings are swapped as well. And for example, you can point it to a different instance of the database if you want to upgrade your DB, etc. All right, so the swap is going on. After a while, we will see that this swap is complete, which means that those typos will have disappeared, which is great. But as you saw, I kind of already sold, or you had a spoiler alert, I would say, because you saw that there was an error happening, because I did introduce actually a regression error. And again, I did that on purpose, but I've done that also many times without wanting it. And the cool thing is that if I detect that there is indeed an error, I can easily go back. So now the swap is complete. If I go back, now this is my main page, all right? I'm going to refresh. After I refresh, we'll see that the typos are gone. So here we go, the typos are gone. This is great. But now I have the problem that if I go to my shopping cart, then suddenly I start getting a lot of errors. So the typos are gone, but my users cannot buy anything, which I think we agree is very bad. And so immediately, no problem at all. As soon as I notice that, I can go here. I can swap back. It's going to take, again, about a minute. And basically, I have lost only, about 2 minutes of customer data. It's not too bad. It could be way worse because my production is still there. In fact, it told me here, if you notice here inside the configuration changes, it told me, hey, be careful because we noticed that your settings are not the same as you had before. Are you sure that you really want to do that? And so in that case, I should have said no. That's actually an error. All right. Quickly, because I'm at the end of the presentation, I want to show you the staging. So staging, what's going on? If I go back to my root, and here I say, all right, I want to have 50% going to the Canary slot and 50% going to production. Let's do that. And now it's going to randomly send people to the Canary slot. Now the Canary slot is one slot where I did something a little bit weird. I tried something new. Because I'm not just a bad developer, I'm also a horrible designer. And I decided, all right, now I want everything red because red is beautiful. So I tried something new. I changed the base color of my website. So now here, this is a dash canary. But the really cool thing here is that if I go back to my main application and I refresh, because I'm in the same session, it's going to stay with the same color as well. It's going to stay in the same slot. But if I take this guy here and I'm going to start another version of Edge, which is Edge Beta, which I also have installed in my application. Or I could also simply go, actually, why not do that? I could go in private window, all right, something where I don't have any cookie or anything. Then it's going to start and it's going to randomly decide if I want to be blue. All right, I'm still blue. Let's do another in private window. And at some point, it's going to show me the red one because it's going to decide right now I have the 50%. Okay, now I just have blue. But if you try at home and go to mod40lb.azurewebsite.net, some of you, 50% of you in average, will see the red one. And then since I'm observing everything with application insight, it's going to allow me to detect, oh, the users love it because they are spending a lot more, for example, in the red website, or oh no, they hate it and they don't even stay half of the normal time, and then they go back to another website, for example, my competition. And so like this, I know that they really don't like the red one. All right, so again, some doc alerts about the slot. This is where you can see how you can set up staging environments. And finally, in review, what did we do? So we talked about Azure Monitor, all right? We saw that it is really a global solution for logging everything in Azure, including your infrastructure and everything. We saw Application Insight, which is a way to instrument your application and check out what's going on at your application level, available for JavaScript, for Java, for .NET. You can instrument even your web application like Angular, React.js, etc., etc. Log analytics, so that we can make sense of the amount of data that we have, the huge amount of data. Snapshot debugging, to go back in time and debug. And finally, if you want to deploy safely, you can use deployment slot. It's really a cool feature. Then you can swap very easily. Here we have a Microsoft Learn collection. So Microsoft Learn is our learning platform where you can go and have some modules, some learning paths as well. You can gain some experience points, and then you can compete with your colleagues. It's quite nice. Here is again the resources. The second line is a repository. You can go there, install the demo that I just showed you on your own subscription and try it out by yourself. Hopefully it was useful for you. My name is Laurent Bugnion. I work as a cloud advocate for Microsoft. And if you have questions, I'll stick around so you can ask in the chat, or also I'll be around in the networking event a little bit later. Thank you so much for your attention and for coming to my home today. Hopefully you had an interesting time and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. It's always nice to know when you like building your application, you're not firing it off into the ether and you have no clue what's happening.
That
so
is
always very, very useful. Can we ask some of the questions that we've got in the QA?
Let me see. Okay, so I have a few. Yeah. I see a few things. So I'm going to try to find the first one. Okay, networking event. Don't forget that you can ask questions. Yes. Does Azure Monitor support containers, AKS, or on-prem Kubernetes? The answer is yes. We have, in fact, if you have a Kubernetes, like an AKS solution, you can actually check the container monitor. And then you're going to have also some information about the health of your application, the health of your nodes, of your controllers and everything. So this is also integrated as a part of Azure Monitor. So there is this part that we specifically call Container Monitor. Now, if you have on-prem Kubernetes, my understanding is that you can also have, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but you can also log things and add that into the Azure Monitor as well. If anybody on the call here has more information, but if you are interested specifically about that, you can always send me a tweet, LBUGNION, or an email. Again, same thing, lbugnion@microsoft.com. Grafana with Azure Monitor, I have to say that unfortunately I have never used it. So again, I would recommend that if you have questions specifically about that, send me an email and I'll be, in fact, I'm going to put my email inside the chat window, voila. And feel free to send me an email and I'll be more than happy to direct that to the correct person. We have some people who are extremely talented with these kind of things. Extension, yeah, so the Azure Mask is pretty cool. It's an extension that I was running in my web browser, and it's going to mask some sensitive information such as your subscription ID, things like that, and that's quite useful, except that I believe I forgot to switch it back on, and so it was, of course, if it switch off, it's not going to be very useful. No big deal. You can add this to a URI, so, yes. To a URI and switch the user session to that specific slot. So I'm not sure exactly what it means, but the slot has its own URI. So it's always going to be, for example, I don't know, like, for example, my own website, galasoft-staging.azurewebsites.net. So it has its own URL. So you can test everything with its own URL first. And then after that, you can, when you swap, of course, it goes back to the to the custom domain if you have one. So I believe that's all the questions I see. So hopefully the rest was clear. If it was not clear, or if you have anything else that you want to discuss, I'm going to stick around and I'm going to observe the chat window for sure.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Yeah. So over to Karika. And for now, some Power Apps with augmented reality.
Awesome. Thanks. So I guess I can share my screen. There we go. Perfect. So yes, hi everyone. I'm going to talk about mixed reality and Power Apps. And then also that you'll see on the first slide is just some awesome hashtags to follow on Twitter. If you want to know more about Power Apps, learn about the Power Platform, less code, more power, that's where we're moving, yay. And mixed reality, like Donna says, mixed reality is the best reality. Yay, Donna. Cool. So firstly, who am I? My name is Karika Botha. I'm a born-again child of God. I'm also a development consultant working for iSolve Business Solutions, and you can find me on Twitter at Karika_. So what are the agenda? I'm going to talk a little bit about what Power Apps actually is, because I'm not too sure how many people are familiar with it and how many not. And then we'll talk a little bit about what is mixed reality, not in too much technical detail, because I'll put a disclaimer out right now that I'm by no means an expert on this. I was playing with it for fun. Then we'll have a demo, we'll go through some lessons learned, and then I'll just share some resources that I've used while playing with this. Cool, so what is Power Apps? Firstly, Power Apps is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. And if you didn't know, Power Apps is almost 5 years old. I was shocked when I saw this. It is also an initiative by Microsoft that allows users to build mobile applications from selectable templates for Android, iOS, and Windows using a less code to no code approach. So what I've heard a lot of presenters say is you can compare it to a mix of PowerPoint and Excel. Cool. And then Power Apps is also empowering both pro developer and citizen developer to build quality business applications. You can find out more. There's like a ton of documentation available on Microsoft Docs for Power Apps and the whole Power Platform. So do check it out. Cool. So what is mixed reality? Abbreviated MR. So according to Wikipedia, yes, I Googled this because, like I said, I'm no expert. Mixed reality is the merging of real and virtual worlds to produce new environments and visualizations. Cool. So what I said previously when I had to explain in my own words, I was like, it's like Narnia, but through your phone and not a door. Yay. You can also add several mixed reality components to your Canvas app. So at the moment, yes, just your Canvas app to support multiple 3D and mixed reality scenarios. What are components? Components are groups of controls that can answer the need for a specific scenario. So for example, you can use the mixed reality components to either view and manipulate 3D content, overlay 3D content and 2D images onto the feed from the camera, which means you can either put a 3D model or a 2D model in your space and then put it where you would want it or imagine it would be. You can measure distance, area, and volume using your device with mixed reality. I've been having lots of fun with that, I honestly have to say. And then you can identify spaces in the real world through a mixed reality overlay. Hey, demo time. Who doesn't like a demo? So let me I'm just going to swap quickly and just share another screen. So let's just go and share my desktop. Get to the demo. Cool. So for this approach, there's multiple ways that you can get those 3D models into your Power Apps. I've chosen SharePoint because I'm most familiar with SharePoint. So what I've done is I've created a SharePoint list, and then within this list, when you first create it, what they suggest in the documentation is that you enable this attachments column, and this is where you will be adding your 3D models. And just note, I'll mention it in the lessons learned later again as well, is that the 3D models, when you're using them, they have to be a .glb format. Cool. And then I've just got metadata columns as well to just give more information to the data. I also have this preview image, which you will see when we start building the app, what this is being used for. Just gives the user an indication of what you're doing. And also to just add some background to the app that we're going to be building this evening is I've been playing around with some ideas. So there's so many opportunities that you can use mixed reality in Power Apps for. So what I went with this evening is a retail store which sells clothing and furniture. Cool. So let's move on to creating an app. When creating apps, you go to make.powerapps.com. And this will take you to the home screen. From there, you navigate to apps, and then immediately you can start to create a new app. You can create 3 types of apps. It can either be a canvas, model-driven, or portal. So tonight we're going to work with Canvas apps, since that is the only one that supports mixed reality at the moment. Also, I would just like to mention that mixed reality is only in public preview, so it's not generally available yet. It's still in the experimental phase. What I've also done is I've pre-created some parts of the app because I wanted to focus on just the mixed reality part, but also let you get the whole feel of what an app would look like. So this is the start of our app. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens. Sorry, yes, I had to count that. Cool. So we'll start off with the home page. There's some cool custom icons here at the bottom. I saw this from April Dunham. If you want to learn a lot more about UI in Power Apps, she's the girl to follow. And then from Louise Fries, also another superhero in the Power Platform, she taught me how to make icons look enabled and disabled. That is so cool. Awesome. In the Browse Store screen, we just have a gallery. And from this gallery, we will be navigating to a new screen by just using a simple method called navigate, and then you mention the screen name. Cool. So the fun is going to start in the item details screen. So at the moment, it's looking pretty bland. Let me just choose one that actually has a description. There we go. Perfect. So firstly, when you first start creating your app, the mixed reality features won't be available. So you will need to go and actually toggle the mixed reality option. And you get that by navigating to File, going to Settings, then you navigate to Advanced Settings, and you scroll down all the way to Experimental Features. You'll see it here. And then way at the bottom, I don't know why it's way down here, but it's there nonetheless. You get mixed reality features. So you just toggle that on. And this you have to do for every app that you create. Okay. Once you've done that, you can go back to your app. And then when you go to the Insert tab, you'll see that you have the mixed reality components, which you can pick to draw to put on the screen. So besides these three that's listed here under the mixed reality component dropdown, you also have another component that sits under media, which is called View in 3D. So to just quickly explain what all four of these components do, the View in 3D allows you to view your model inside of your app, not making use of your camera or the camera of the device that you're using. That's just to like preview your 3D model. The View in mixed reality, that is the button you want that you can press so that you can view your 3D model through the camera of the device that you're using, which will then place the 3D model inside of your actual reality. Cool. Then we've got View Shape in MR. What this does is it allows you to specify measurements, and then you can place a cube. So let's say in the instance where you've got measurements for something, but there's no 3D model for it, you can actually start spacing it into your environment and see if it will actually fit with those measurements. And then Measure in MR does exactly what it says. It allows you to measure either distance or an area or area and volume. But we'll see that all in action just now. Cool, so how do we start adding these components and what can we do with them? So we'll start by adding this View in 3D component to the screen. I like the alignment options that you get when building as well. Helpful. Cool. So once we've added it, let's just look at the properties on the right that we have for this component. We've got source and background fill. So you can decide the color that you want for your background fill to be. Source, this will be the URL that you use where your 3D model is stored. So there's some examples where you can actually have your 3D models saved in GitHub. You could also use OneDrive. It could be a location where you get it from an Excel spreadsheet. And then in my case, I've used the attachments column in SharePoint. So to specify the source, we will be typing first. And then we're going to use the retail gallery, which is on the previous screen. And we want the selected item, the attachment for the selected item that we've picked in gallery. And we want that value. You will see that it actually gives the URL of where that 3D model is located. Great stuff. And that's the first component complete. That's literally how easy it is to add your 3D model. I must honestly say what took me the longest time was finding content that I want to display. Just also another hint, the loading time of your 3D model depends on the size. I've realized this while I was playing with this in this time. So yeah, just take note of that. Cool, so the next component we're going to add is the View in MR. So this is more a button-like component, which allows you to click and then access the camera on your device. And then I like to, you can, on the properties on the right, you can set different text for it. You can call it whatever you want. And you can also decide if you want to display an icon plus text, just the icon or just text. I prefer the icon because it just looks neat. And then this button is also totally customizable. You can change the color to blend in with your theme and all of that. But the important properties for this component is the source, the object width, object height, object depth, and the unit of measurement. Why are these important? They are important because this determines the size that your 3D object model will load once you view it through your camera. So at first I didn't specify these values and my 3D models came out like tiny on the ground and I couldn't understand why it's doing that. But then I realized because these things weren't set. So what I did was in the SharePoint list that I created, I actually have columns for the width, the height, the depth, and the unit of measurement. Cool, so let's set all of those now. So we're going to set the source once again to the gallery selected item. Gallery. That's what we're going to set for source. Then we're going to do object depth. And this we're going to set to retail gallery. What's nice is the retail gallery's data source is my SharePoint list. So that's why I have access to all the columns within my SharePoint list. As you can see, they're popping up with the IntelliSense as well. And then you always get the value of the selected item inside your gallery. Dot selected. Item depth. Cool. And then we're just going to do the same for height and width. So as you can see, it's really easy to set these values and it's not taking any programming or, you know, complicated functions at all. So we're doing height. And then we want to do it for width. So item width. Cool. And then we're still going to set units because we need the units of measurement that you want to use for your 3D model. And then there's one more thing that I want to set on this. So let's go to units, which is retail gallery, selected. Value. Cool. So one of the other properties, so by the way, you can set the properties on the left here as well as I've been doing. It's the same as here on the right. It's just easier here because then you get the formula bar. So another property I want to set is the onChange property. So why I'm setting this is because when you view your 3D model through your device's camera, you actually get an option, like there's a button there that allows you to capture the images. So you get to capture your 3D model in your space. And then we just want to collect those photos and save them to a gallery as well, which you can then either upload them to SharePoint or download them. I'm actually very curious. That's what I want to do next, is to try and get those pictures taken to download them to my phone or to my actual device, which will be pretty cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type collect, and I'm going to create a collection called my pictures. And I'll be using that throughout the demo as well. My pictures, and what am I collecting? I'm collecting this buttons. Self is the cool new feature that Power Apps introduced not so long ago. So this controls photos. Cool. And then we've got the properties set for this control as well. So what I wanted to do is go through all the steps, add all the controls, and then at the end, I will show you a video of how the app is working. I did pre-record the app working. The reason for that is because we know anything can go wrong, and it's much easier to show these things during the day than in the evening. So please excuse me for pre-recording the video, but I promise you it's as easy as I'm showing you now to implement this. So this is the first screen done that will actually, where you can view your model, play with it on the app, and then also display it through your device's camera. The next screen we're going to work on is the Measurements Explore app or screen, where we will add the other two controls that we find in mixed reality. And this will be the view shape in MR and the measure in MR. So I'm just going to go ahead and add these. Excuse me. And then just resize them. And then once again, if we take the measure in MR and we look on the right-hand side, you'll see that this component's properties is taking unit of measurement and measurement type. That's the only two properties that it needs. And this is where you will be able to choose whether you want to measure in meters, centimeters, inches, and I think the other one is feet. And then your measurement type will be whether you're measuring, let me just go ahead and click those. You either get area and volume, distance, or either just volume. Cool. So what I've done is I've actually created drop downs on the screen where I allow the user to choose which measurement they want to use. And then I change the properties of this component to rather use the input of those drop downs. So let's go ahead and change that. So we want to, with the measurements one, we want to change the properties of the measurement type. And here we will set it to use the drop down list. Measurement type dot selected text dot value. Great, cool. And then we're also going to update the units property and set this to the units drop down. Units of measurement dot select text dot value. Great. And then also for this component, once again, you get the capability of taking a picture. So we're also going to update the onChange event or property to once again collect the images taken by the user. And we're also going to collect it into the My Pictures collection, which we will display in a gallery. Oh, it's taking a bit of time to type here. My pictures, and then we want to collect self.photos. There we go. Great. And that's the only thing that we need to set there. And then, as you'll see, I've got a data table here at the bottom. So what this data table is for is to collect the measurement results captured when you use the measure in MR component. You'll see once we actually run the app that there will be a submit button on screen as well. And that allows you to submit the measurements you've just taken. So we've got the height, the path length, and the unit. There's also, if we go to edit fields for this data table's properties, you'll see that there's a field that you can add Let me just see. I go to data table, edit fields. It doesn't show that one at the moment, but there's an additional field that you can add, but that one is a much more complex one, and therefore I didn't add it for this demo. And then as you can see, the items for this table I've set to measuring MR1, which is this component's name on the left-hand side. And it's taking the measurements detailed. And that's what that submit button sends through. So it gets displayed here. Cool. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add the last component that we get when we enable this mixed reality feature. And it's to view shape in MR. So let's just resize this. I'm going to drag it all the way to the bottom. So this button is actually quite descriptive. Place a cube. That's exactly what it does. And you specify the width, the height, and the depth of what the cube will look like. So when creating this control, once again on the right-hand side, you'll see you've got shape, width, height, depth, and unit of measurement. And that is the properties that will that is used when placing the cube using the camera's device, the device camera. So what I've done here is you can specify it in here, or once again, you can allow the user to specify these values, and then they can place any size or cube any size they want onto the screen. So once again, I'm just going to update the properties to take the input from these text boxes that's on the app. So let's just do that quickly. Shape depth is gonna get and that's all that we do for shape height. We're gonna take the text height. The text. Cool. And then for shape width, we're gonna take text width. Text. Perfect. And then for units, we're going to use the same DLL that's at the top of the screen. So we're going to do DLL unit of measurement. Select the text. And then lastly, we also want to collect the photos, because you can also take photos of the cube that you've placed in your space. So we're just going to collect those into the My Pictures collection as well. Perfect. And that's literally all there is to it to enable your Power App to have mixed reality features by using the mixed reality components. Lastly, I've got a photo gallery screen. And just to show you, for the gallery, I've set the items to be the collection called My Pictures. And the images shown will be this item.image URI, which is the image URI of the items captured in My Pictures. Cool. So once that's done, very important, and I forgot almost to point out this very, very important step, is it's always important to save. When you first start creating an app, the first thing you need to do is save and publish so that you know you have a copy of your app, because if you refresh your browser or you just close the window, that app is going to be gone. So save, save, save. It's super important. So let's save the app. and then we'll publish it. By publishing it, you will actually make the app available onto your device. For using Power Apps on your device, you will need to download the Power Apps app from either the Play Store or iOS. Then, once you have that, you log on with your profile or your account that you use or where you built the app, and then you will be able to run the app. You will need to also allow the app access to your camera, obviously, to be able to use it. So let me just show you what this app does. So why I decided to choose clothing is because I have this idea, like imagine if you were able to try on clothes in the comfort of your own home without having to go to the store. So it's still a little bit fuzzy. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And like I said, I was playing with this. So if the pants looks a little bit silly, I chose the pants because it was the smallest in size. And I had a small candidate who was willing to pose for the pants. Another thing that I found, which is a challenge a little bit at the moment, is if you want to do shirts and things, it places the item on the ground. So it's difficult to move it up and down. You can move it like the item, the 3D model goes backward and forward, but it doesn't go up and down. So these are all challenges that I found while doing it. So as you can see, I'm trying to get the pants to fit the person. But it was a lot of fun. And it is so exciting to actually see this model that I've just now downloaded, and I literally didn't code a thing. And here I have a 3D model inside of my device's camera, and I'm using it. It was so quick and so easy. It took the shortest time to build the app. It took me about, at the most, 30 minutes.
Well, that's awesome.
What took me the longest time was getting content to actually play. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I just have another model. I'm going to try a table where you can actually see if a dining table would fit in your space. So I love this feature so much. I also love, as you can see, you can rotate and play around with the model in that view 3D model component, which is very cool. And then you can show it through your device. And then we'll go to the lessons learned just now. So you'll see the table will be there soon. And there we go. What's nice about placing these 3D models as well is you can move it around, you can rotate it. It's literally, I mean, it's like having the thing there, and it's not. It's confusing though. It plays with your mind. So beware, don't go and sit on that chair if you have it there, because you're going to fall. So, but it's a lot of fun. I've been having so much fun, and there's a lot of creators out there, the Power Platform, the Power Addicts, that's been creating amazing apps with mixed reality as well. I actually wanted to add a Star Wars theme, but I didn't find any great looking Yodas to put in my space. So I went for furniture and clothing. Here you can see the photo. If I move it so slightly, you can see the photos taken using that app. So now we're going to go to the measurement one, where you can select the measurements you want to measure with. The measurement type, I like the area and volume one, because when you measure with this, you'll see, as I'm measuring now, you like measure a rectangle or a square, and then when you measure the height of the object, it actually creates a, what can I call it, a cube for you. And then you can take photos with these measurements as well. So imagine you need to go to a store and you can be like, it kind of like, look, the shape is this and the measurements are this, you know. So it's very, very useful. I can see like so much potential for what we can do with these mixed reality capabilities within Power Apps. So as you can see, the measurement stays in place, and you can once again move it around, you can rotate it, take photos. Let me just move my way. Now you can see the submit button. You see a little plus button. The plus button is there to keep on adding measurements up until the point where you've got a full either square or triangle. It all depends. And then as you can see, it's captured the measurements inside that data table. So next we're just going to do the place a cube one. I've specified the measurements, and now I just need to decide where I want to place the cube. I actually think our dog senses the mixed reality things, because when I take it close to her, she just runs away, which is very interesting. She's done it with quite a few that I've played with. Cool, and then you've got your cube, you've got it in a space, and you can move it around, rotate it. It is so cool. I've been having so much fun creating these things and playing with mixed reality in Power Apps. And I really see a lot of potential for it going forward. Once again, you can take photos. And then we'll view those photos in a gallery. There we go. So let's just go back to the presentation. Lessons learned. So firstly, this mixed reality capability only works on devices that is compatible with the AR Core app from Google. I learned this the hard way. Unfortunately, I had a phone that wasn't AR Core capable. It was so sad. I was so like, man. So I got myself a new phone. Imagine that. That is capable of this these features. So I'm providing the URL. You can find the list of supported devices. Unfortunately, if your device doesn't support the AR Core app from Google, this mixed reality functionality will not work. Cool. Point number 2, read the documentation. I can't emphasize this enough. There's so much documentation available on docs.microsoft.com, and they really have a lot of the mixed reality things there already. I was silly enough to try for more than half an hour to try and figure out how do I switch mixed reality on, and it was just a toggle, and it was in the documentation. Cool. Point number 3, the models needs to be in a .glb format. There's a lot of tools out there where you can convert other formats to a .glb format, and it's really easy to do that. Number 4, don't overthink the content. I've done this too many times where I'm like, you end up scrolling for content for hours. So don't overthink the content, use what you can and just start playing with it. And then 5, your phone needs good quality focus and RAM. I promise you this, because the reason I'm mentioning focus is you would have noticed with the app, there's those little dots that form on the surface. If there isn't good focus with one of the camera, or sometimes like even with the floor where I was doing a little bit fuzzy, the camera struggles to get a focus on it. It doesn't give those dots, and those dots is what I think the AR Core app uses to place your 3D model. And if that is a bit messy, then the model is going to be messy as well. I've had instances where the model literally drifts away while I'm busy viewing it. I was like, what? But yeah, fun times. I've been having lots of fun. And then he introduced me to use Visor to present something from my phone, because I was panicking before this talk. I was like, oh, I can't demo because I don't know how to share my phone with the Teams live event. And then he mentioned Visor, so do check it out if you don't know about it. I'm enjoying it a lot. Cool. Resources that I've used. Number 1, Microsoft Docs. Yes, go and read. Cool. Number 2, Sketchfab is a great resource for free 3D models. There's a lot, so have fun. You can also use 3D Viewer on Windows. It has an awesome library, and you can use 3D Paint on Windows to save the file as a .fpx and then to my next point, there's a cool, that's creators3d.com, is where you can convert your FBX models to .glb. The reason I use this is with 3D Viewer, when I use those models, I actually exported it as a .glb file, everything was fine, but when I wanted to view my models, they were just white, like completely blank, as if it's a blank painting. So that's why I used 3D Viewer and 3D Paint and exported it as a FBX first and then converted it to a GLB, because I think during that whole process, it includes the textures and all of that. Don't know how it works, but it works. Then I also watched a great how-to video by Jessie's Power channel. She actually helped me a lot in getting around like all the properties for the buttons and everything. So kudos to her. Then another great resource is the Microsoft Application Summit video by Michael O'Connor. That's where he actually introduces the whole mixed reality and Power Apps concept. Great demos, check it out. And then lastly, but definitely not the least, is do check out the Power Apps community blog. There is a whole host of information about Power Apps, the Power Platform, what's happening in mixed reality, new functionality inside of Power Apps. It really is such an exciting platform. Yeah, do check it out. Thank you, everyone. That is me.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was awesome. But note to self, don't give you advice on tools because you've just put me out of a job. It takes us ages to build mixed reality apps in native apps. That was really cool. Yeah, and you also, what part of this makes you not an expert? Because you look like you really mastered this. How long did it take to learn?
To add the components to Power Apps took me like less than half an hour. To learn how 3D models work and converting them to types of files, and oh my goodness, I was lost in that world, I have to be honest.
Okay, but yeah, it looks really, really awesome.
Cool.
Let's check if there's any questions.
Oh, cool. Let me just browse through as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with Donna.
You need to make the donut a mascot. Hey?
I have to agree with Donna. This is definitely the best MR demo for Power Apps we've seen.
Really? Yay!
Oh, it was really cool.
I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. Is there, I'm not seeing any questions. I don't know if it's just me. And just to add some context to the donut, everyone, this is a balloon I got for my birthday, and it's still floating. I absolutely love this.
Is it real or is it MR?
Let's see. No, it's pretty real.
Awesome. Okay, I see Ewald is asking, does it remind anyone of Delphi? Yes, it does. Delphi was cool.
Okay. I guess that's where I'm not an expert comes in. I'm not too sure. I'm too young for Delphi.
Yeah, that's only for old people. So that's why Ewald's asking the question. It looks like all the questions.
Very old.
No, thank you very much.
Cool, great. Thanks, guys.
Cool. And now over to Khomelemo, which will be doing a talk on Blazor and custom vision.
Yay.
I hope he's still on the call.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Welcome.
Cool. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. All right. So can everyone hear me?
You sound good.
Awesome. Hello everyone and welcome to today's live event. My name is Homelemo and I am a Gold Microsoft Student Partner and third-year college student. Today, I'm really excited to be sharing this great technology with you all, Blazor. But before I start, I think it would be best if I just briefly remind everyone of what .NET is. .NET is an entire software development platform that takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting for you when you want to build an application. Application frameworks help you build the specific types of apps or workloads and enable you to literally build any app for any platform with any operating system. Each .NET workload shares a common infrastructure and .NET standard library. This means that not only are your .NET skills portable, but your actual code is portable, no matter what you're building. This makes it easy to share reusable components across the breadth of applications that people build. So like I said, .NET is your platform for building anything that can run anywhere. Microsoft has made significant investments in .NET over the years, as well as unifying the ecosystem to support building literally anything, from desktop to gaming to the cloud. .NET is a general purpose programming platform which is built to be fast and secure, and it enables all kinds of application scenarios. Once you learn one, you can easily pick up another. This is due to its common set of innovative languages, tools, and frameworks that you can use to stay productive across all platforms. So now, let's talk about ASP.NET, which is used to make web apps. Now, ASP.NET has always been a great way for building server-rendered web apps. This is where you would write some .NET code on a server, and that code would generate some HTML or JSON in response to browser requests. This is particularly great for backends. But if you wanted to do anything on the front end or the clients in the browser, then you would have to make use of one of these guys. You would have to use some form of JavaScript. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great things about JavaScript, but there's also some additional cost and overhead while trying to bridge these two very different developer worlds with different languages, tools, and frameworks. But this is no longer the case. You can now write your client-side web app logic using .NET with Blazor. Blazor is a client-side web user interface framework where you get to write .NET and C# instead of JavaScript. You write UI components that encapsulate your UI logic using C# and Razor. You can then share your .NET code with the same assemblies with both the clients and the server. If you got some validation logic, then you can use the same logic on both sides. Blazor is relatively new and it cannot do every single thing that JavaScript can. So if you still need to call into some JavaScript code, you can do that. You still have access to all native JavaScript APIs and other libraries through a JavaScript interop mechanism. So Blazor is largely made possible by a relatively new open web standard called WebAssembly, or WASM. It is basically, WASM is bytecode for the web. The idea is that you can compile your code to WebAssembly. It can now run, and in that way, it can now run in any browser on any platform in near native speeds. So the geniuses over at Microsoft have been working for a while to get .NET to run on WebAssembly. They have built a .NET runtime which runs or which acts on WebAssembly. So how does Blazor actually work with WebAssembly? The browser provides the core WebAssembly support. And then on top of that, there's a .NET WebAssembly runtime. We then build our Razor components that gets compiled into normal .NET assemblies, and then they are downloaded with the runtime into the browser and then executed directly in the browser. The browser then sends us UI events to the .NET code. Our components then run, then they render the UI, and Blazor does the hard work of figuring out what exactly changed in the UI. The difference is then sent back to the DOM and updated very efficiently. Now, the cool thing about Blazor is that you can host it in multiple different ways. We've talked about running your app on WebAssembly, but you can also run your Blazor apps and host them on the server using the very same components. The way that a Blazor server app works is that your components run on the server, then the browser sets up a real-time connection using SignalR with the server, and that's what it uses to handle and send all the UI events that the user is creating. When a button click occurs, it gets sent to the server, and then the corresponding component runs just like it does on a Blazor WebAssembly app. Then the component renders, and then Blazor again does the hard work of calculating the difference in the UI, and then it will try to serialize that difference back down the real-time connection back to the browser, so that it can be applied to the DOM. So both Blazor Server and WebAssembly are supported in .NET Core 3.1. These two models are available for download and ready for production. Now, the question is, how do you pick between these two different hosting models? Well, there are various pros and cons to each, so it's really up to you to choose. A Blazor WebAssembly app is really a true single-page app. It has full interactivity as it runs client-side on the user's device. You can use all the user's device resources like its CPU, memory, its storage, but to the extent that the browser will let you. It supports offline usage, meaning that you can build apps that work without a live internet connection. You can also deploy it as a static site, which means that you can, you not even need to have .NET running on a server to host your app, because basically a Blazor WebAssembly app is just a bunch of static files. Blazor server apps have a really small download because the only thing that they need to download is a little piece of infrastructure code that sets up that real-time SignalR connection. Your Blazor component is now running on the server on a full .NET Core runtime, and it has access to all the resources that the server has access to. If you want to talk directly to the database, you can do that from a Blazor server app. Some people really like that your code never leaves the server in a Blazor server app. So how can you get started learning Blazor? I recommend going to blazor.net. That's where you can find all the getting started instructions and the Blazor docs. You're going to want to install .NET Core 3.1 if you're interested in playing around with Blazor. You will also need to install Visual Studio 2019 for Windows or Mac, or you can even use VS Code with the C# extension. So let's actually get started writing a bit of Blazor code. So let me just stop that. And then I wanted to show you, basically, when you open up VS 2019, obviously we met with this page, and then we just create a new project here. And then if you can't see the template in the list here, you can just simply search for what we want. So in this case, we're looking for Blazor, and then we just click on Blazor app, and then you can name the app whatever you want to name it to here. And then once we click on create, we're met with a different screen where we are asked to choose between those two different hosting models that I talked about earlier on, a Blazor server app and a Blazor WebAssembly app. Notice that with the Blazor WebAssembly app, two options appear here in the bottom right. You can either have this WebAssembly app ASP.NET Core hosted, because essentially this is a front-end client-side app, or you can choose to make it a progressive web app. And basically what a progressive web app is, it borders on being a web app and essentially a native desktop or mobile app where you can install it onto your phone and it'll use your device resources and interact with anything on that device, which is pretty cool. So once you choose your hosting models, we can click on create. So I've already done that, and I'm just going to switch on over to an app here that I've prepared earlier on. So if you were to run this, let's just build that. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our browser, and I will show you what the bare minimum Blazor app looks like. So what will happen is, let's come back here, sorry, here, right? And then let's refresh that. Basically, this is what you are met with if you were to create a Blazor WebAssembly app. It is very cool because from the get-go, you already have a full working app that you can start working with. So what I've done is I've added this navigation link here to my left here called Student Partner Bonus. And that is actually what we're going to be working on right now. So if I click on that link, right, you'll see that there's a bit of an error message, so to speak. Sorry, there's nothing at this address, because essentially what it has done, it has tried to navigate to /bonus, which you can find here on top. And if it can't find any component that matches this URL, then it won't have anything to display. So let's actually fix that. So what I'll be doing is I'll come back here to VS 2019, and the first thing I'll do is I'll forward your attention to this pages folder here on our right, and this is where we get our various components, right? So when you think of a Blazor app, you're essentially thinking of a app that is comprised of multiple components. I've been told that this is very similar to the model used in React. So I'm going to add a Razor component, and then I'm going to call it bonus. Let's add that there. And then once that shows up, let me make it nice and big for the senior citizens watching. So let's actually start from scratch, okay? Let's completely clear that, and then let's start coding using Blazor. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an @page directive, okay? And basically what an @page directive is, it's basically how the app will know, well, basically it's the address to this specific page, okay? So whenever a user were to navigate to this link here, then whatever is shown on this page will be what our user sees. So let's add some text there. So you'll see if I were to just build that, right? And then we go back to our browser, what will happen is when we navigate to /bonus, then we should be able to see what we have written. Now there's an active page working at that URL. And all I had to do was to add this add page directive at the top of my screen. Right. So let's actually, we're going to write some simple HTML here. Right. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a header. And then let's leave that there. So just to let you know that whatever I add to the screen will show for us right here on our page. So now the thing that I'm trying to build, let's actually try and look at something more real world. Okay, this is a basic budget allocation UI, and basically what it is, it's just we have a bunch of entities on our left here. We have a slider, and then we have a corresponding component which represents the numeric value of the slider next to it. So this is something I'm sure we have all seen, and we're going to try and attempt to build this using Blazor. Just for a bit of context there. So the first thing in which I'm going to do, I need to actually write some C# code. And how would I do that in a Blazor or Razor component? I would just have to add this code block. And this code block is basically used to write any form of C# in a Blazor component. So the first thing that we need is, because we are working with budget, okay, we would need the total budget. And because we are all we are dealing with student partners, I think we would deserve a budget of $1 million, and that's to the context of wherever you are, R1 million, $1 million, whatever it may be. So I'm going to start with the total budget, and then I'm just going to write some simple, just a simple list here where I will be referencing a class that I made earlier on, and I'll show that to you now. So earlier on, I created a simple C# class here called MSP level. That's basically what it is. And in MSP level, I have two properties, being name and amount. And basically, if you look at our slider, that is basically all we need. We need a name, the name of the entity we're assigning the values to, and we need the amounts that we're going to assign. So in our components, we need a list of levels. So I choose MSP level because in the Microsoft Student Partner Program, we have 4 main levels. So I'm just going to write them here. Let's just, so we have gold, we have beta, we have alpha 1 and alpha 2. Okay, so basically these are the levels that we have in the Student Partner Program. And obviously this data can come from any data source, from a JSON file, from a database, whatever you would want that data to come from. But for the sake of this demo, I'll just add this here. Then once we have that list, we can then start to build our UI, okay? So I have a simple div here that I'm gonna just write, and then inside the div, I'm gonna write for each loop where I'm going to iterate through the the list that I created. And what I want in that list, I want three things. The first thing that I want to display the name of the entity that I'm going to be assigning the values to. The second thing that I want to see on screen is I want to see the amount that I'm going to be assigning. And then I'm going to be converting or showing that as a currency value. And then the third thing I want to see is my slider, but we won't actually write the slider for now. Let's just have that there. Okay. So let's build that, and then let's just see what it looks like on screen. So basically, that's what I have. I have the levels, I have the amounts, and I have my slider. And then, so the next step now will then to build this slider and start to use Blazor UI events to connect this slider to the amount. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to just replace the slider code here with an input, right? Not radio range, and then I'm going to have the max value, right? So obviously I start at 0, but we have a budget that we need to keep to. So I think total, I think that the maximum value is obviously equal to the total budget that we have, right? You can't go further than the amount that we have. Step, that's pretty straightforward. With step, what I mean is, as we move the slider, by how much will the value increment by? If we have 1, then we would need to move the slider 1,000,000 times to get to 1,000,000. So we're trying to increase that step so that we can slide quite easily. And then what I'll do is I will add a bind. And if you guys can see, that tag changed color. Wherever you see this, you know that you're actually working with a native Blazor event and not JavaScript. And that actually makes me very, very happy. Right? So we should have that slider there. It's basically a slider. The maximum value is our total, and it'll go up by 1,000. Right. So what I'm doing in this bind event here, I'm binding the slider to the amount that I'm assigning to. So basically, whenever I move my slider, it's going to, in real time, affect the amount that I'm assigning to each of my entities. That's basically what I've done here. So we'll just go back to the browser and see that in effect. And then, as you can see, we have our sliders working, right? So that actually looks pretty good, but there's a bit of an issue. And the issue that I see is that when I slide, then the amounts on the ends here only pick up the change once I let go of my slider, okay? And that's a bit weird, because now I can't even enter specific amounts because I'm guessing half the time. So I would like to see my UI reacting in real time to when I slide. And the reason why this is happening is because to those who are familiar with web technologies, right? I'm not an expert by the way, so, but I know that with web technologies, the default event in the browser is on change, if I'm not mistaken. So that basically means that this piece of UI will only take effect once I leave. That onChange event will only fire up once I let go of my component, and that is the default event. So what we want to do is we want to override that onChange event, and what we will do is we're going to be doing a onInput. So as soon as an input is made, that's when we want our binding events to happen. So if you go back to our UI here, then we were able to see that as we move the slider, then your values are changing with the tags here on the side, right? So that is actually pretty good, right? But now there's another issue that I'm looking at, and that issue is basically we have a total budget, and how do I know when I've reached that budget? Obviously, we can just add all of these, and if we get to 1 million, that's it, we are done. But we are not all great in our math. So what will happen is we need to have some sort of reminder telling us how much we have left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a property in my code called remaining. And I'm going to compute remaining as the total budget minus the sum of the amounts that have already been assigned in our UI. That's basically what it is. So we have all of these sliders. We're going to add the sum of all of those amounts and subtract that from our budget. And then that will be the remaining amount that we have left. So we have our property. So we need a way to display that on screen. So what I'll do is I'll have that, and then another one there where I will actually show the remaining amounts formatted as currency. Okay, so let's see what that does to our UI. Waiting for that to build, and then refresh that. So now we have the remaining amount here, and as we move, then we're able to see how much we have left, right? And that is good. That's what we want. But the issue is, if I go over the limit, then you'll notice that it starts going into negatives, right? Because this is way more than the budget that we have left. And this is in part because I said that the maximum amount that we can put on all these sliders is our budget. And if you remember, we had a budget of 1 million, which means every one of these sliders can go up to 1 million. So we need to actually stop that. So how do we do that? Let's go back to our code here, and we need to change our slider, but only one property, and that's the max, right? We can't have every slider have a maximum value of 1 million. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be setting the maximum property here to the amount that has already been assigned on that slider plus whatever is remaining, right? So basically what I'm saying is, if I've assigned 100,000 to the slider, then that means that whatever is left is what I can assign to that specific entity. So I cannot assign more than what is remaining at any given point. So let's actually see what that does for our code. for our UI, and you'll see that once we get to our limit, then you can't assign any more because we have 0 left, and that's exactly what we want. So we are getting somewhere. However, there's another issue that we have here, and that is when I've assigned all the money, all the sliders are in the same place. And that can be an issue because visually, this doesn't properly represent what we have on the side here. Because if I were to come in and see this on screen, I would assume that all of these had the same value because they are in the same place on the UI. And that takes us back to this image here, where you can clearly see that this amount over here is larger than that amount. And in result of that, the slider is further ahead than the slider above it. So we need to accurately represent the position of this slider on our UI. So we need to sort of change the scale of our slider. So how exactly are we going to do on that? So again, we come back to our slider here, and we're going to add an additional property. So I'm going to just add a style here. And what I'll do with the style, I'm going to be changing the width dynamically. And how exactly do we do that? What I'll do is I'm going to say I would want a percentage, right? So let's have a percentage of the amount which is currently assigned, right? The amount that I can still assign divided by my budget. Okay, so that is what I am looking for, and because I'm dealing with width, I'm going to put a percentage sign there. So basically, what I'm saying is, I want the width of this slider to be proportional to the amount that I've assigned, meaning that if I've assigned half of my total budget, then the width of my slider should be half of what it originally was. Okay, that's what I'm trying to accomplish with that jumbled up maths there. So let's go back to our UI and see the difference. So what will happen is, oops, we don't have a slider anymore. Let's see what is the issue. I didn't separate that, and sorry. Yeah, so it's 100 multiplied by this to get, and then we divide by that to get the percentage. Okay, so let's build that again. And then what we'll do is we'll come back here and then look at our UI, and let's see what that did. So as I'm assigning money to the top, you will notice that the other sliders are decreasing in size because the scale of how much I can assign to those other entities is decreasing. So visually, without even moving the other sliders, I can visually see how much I can still assign to the other entities, right? And that is great because then you can see that if in the real world, if I was allocating budget to this entity, then you'll visually see where I'm taking that money away from, and that is good, right? So this is actually what we are hoping for, and that is great. But now, what if someone is silly, right? They've been given a budget of $1 million and they don't assign all of their money. Okay, so how do we make sure that this is that all the money is used in our UI? So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a simple save button. Okay, so let's add that there. However, this save button should be disabled for as long as we still have money. So how do we do that? It should be disabled for as long as the remaining amount is still more than 0. Okay, so if we were to let's unbuild that, and if we were to see what that does on our UI, basically that save button will not work until we allocate everything, right? It's as simple as on that. These are just this is just the basic implementation of what we can do using .NET and Blazor, right? In the past, this would not have been possible without some form of JavaScript. But now, earlier on, I actually mentioned that with the Blazor WebAssembly model, you can actually host this application on as a static site, right? So how do we do that? Because I have a bunch of C# files, I'm writing C# code and all of that. It's as easy as publishing this specific app, and yes, I'm gonna right-click publish. So I know that this is a taboo in the industry. Forgive me, I'm still learning. So when I publish, I'm going to make sure that I choose the folder option, because I want everything to compile into a list of files, which I will then upload to my server. So then before I click on publish, I should take note of my URL and where that all of these files are going to be pasted to. So I've already published that, and basically this is your entire WebAssembly app and all of these files. And I can take this and upload them to a GitHub Pages repo or a Azure storage account, which is enabled for static websites, right? The possibilities are endless. But remember that this model is only available for the WebAssembly hosting model, not the server one. That one you would still need to have an active server running, let's say on Azure, for example. So let me actually show you. I have this GitHub repo here, and all of the files that I just shown you over here have been uploaded to this repo, right? A more efficient way of doing this would be to upload the actual project folder, and then you would use GitHub Actions to automate that publish key whenever you make changes to the app, right? So I'm just taking a bit of a shortcut here because I don't want to steal Vendrin's thunder for next month. So basically this is what we have, and then the site should be hosted on my static page. This new GitHub layout is weird. Okay, there you go. Right, and you can see I have a live Blazor WebAssembly app hosted for free on static pages, and it works just like how you would expect, right? You would think that this is using JavaScript, but no, us .NET lovers can bask in all that magnificent glory. So just before I end there, just before I end there, I would like to forward your attention to this specific workshop on GitHub. It's at aka.msblazor workshop. It's basically it's a 10-session workshop that allows anyone to build this specific application using Blazor. It goes through a bunch of really good features like authentication and incorporating gRPC, It's not that difficult to follow. Anyone can follow it, even if you don't have experience using .NET, and you just have to follow all these sessions and you'll be able to build a pretty good UI using Blazor instead of JavaScript. So yeah, with that, I would like to thank everyone for listening, and open to any questions that have come in. Okay. Questions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was great. There's a question about, can you use it with JavaScript components, JavaScript packages?
Yes. So earlier on, I spoke about a mechanism in Blazor where you can call JavaScript interrupt, where you can actually invoke any type of JavaScript that you have. An example, which I was actually supposed to show you guys now, but I had some issues with my camera. An example would be using your web app to interact with your camera, right? That is something which is quite easy with JavaScript, but however, Blazor hasn't implemented that yet in their structure. So you would have to interrupt through that using Blazor. You would just inject your Blazor interrupt components into your page and then use that to talk to any JavaScript files that you may have in your project.
Okay, cool. And then things like React and Angular and stuff will obviously work with it.
I'm actually not too sure, but I'm sure it will. Yeah, obviously, yeah.
And then I see there's a lot of hate of Silverlight, some love of Silverlight.
Yeah, I do get a lot of people saying that, oh, this is similar or it reminds them of Silverlight, but I am too young to even know what Silverlight is, so I'm not really sure about that.
Okay, but no, it's absolutely nothing like Silverlight. Silverlight is basically a browser plugin that is a container for putting your UI code and your XAML and all that type of thing to run. Blazor adheres to all the .NET, not .NET, all the web standards. So WASM is a web standard and it adheres to everything that JavaScript does. It's not a little container like Flash or Silverlight.
Okay. Yeah, IMC Blazor is definitely not Silverlight. Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Sure. Any other questions? I can't
definitely can't leave with the audience thinking it's Silverlight. It's definitely not.
Okay, yeah. I don't see any other questions. See Lou wants someone to unburn. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so there's any comments. .NET is the bestest thingamajig, which I agree, definitely.
Yes, I am very young. Youngsters.
Yes. Yeah, no, that looks like all the questions.
Sure.
No, thank you very much. That was really, really awesome.
Thank you very much.
And if there's any questions, you will be attending the networking event.
Sure.
Yes,
I will.
Okay. So yeah, so if there's any questions, Homo will be at the networking event. Okay, so I think we can start wrapping up. Let me share some slides. Okay, thank you very much to all the speakers. we had some really awesome topics tonight and some really high caliber speakers. So we're very, very lucky to have the speakers. But everyone has something to say and something interesting to share with the community. So if you'd like to present something at our user groups, there's a sessionized link. There's one for Cape Town, one for Johannesburg as well. If you want to submit for Durban, unfortunately we don't have a Durban one, but you can submit for Cape Town and Johannesburg, and of course we will make sure that Durban gets it as well. And we have, for those that do want to network with us, even if you just want to hang and talk about non-tech stuff, we'll be around for a little while. It'll be not in this live stream event, it'll be in a separate Teams meeting, and the URL will be https://ms/MSDUG networking. But hope to see you all there, and you're welcome to have any beverage of your choice. I see there's going to be milkshakes and stuff. I hope the milkshakes have been couriered to me right now, because I haven't seen anyone at my gate yet, but I'll live in hope. But yes, thank you very, very much for attending, and thanks once again to the amazing speakers. Have a good evening.